Okay, here we are again, another webinar on cash flow and what bits and pieces of your business drive your cash flow, how you measure that, and perhaps a few little things, a few strategies you can put in place that won't cost you a cent, but will actually boost the cash coming through your business, which will give you more money to do more things to boost your cash flow, to give you more money to do more things to boost your cash flow. And that's a pretty cool way of doing business. So just give me 1 second here. Oops, try that again. Let's go to what we're all talking about, and that will be cash flow management. Happy days. All right, once again, welcome. Now, we're just going to rock through the 7 main drivers of your cash flow, being, whoops, let's do that again. There we go. There's three on the balance sheet, 4 on the profit and loss, and these are the things that actually make you money. All right, now, none of this is rocket surgery. None of this is suddenly invented by Kelby 3 minutes ago. They're all business fundamentals. But there's 2 things I need to point out to you. One, if you're just starting in business, this is not too advanced. This is actually stuff you need to know and start measuring and put systems in place for now. And if you've been in business for a while, it's the same thing. There's nothing here that you shouldn't be measuring already. Even if you do it by gut instinct, you should have an understanding of the fundamentals that are driving these things. And if you're not putting systems in place to keep an eye on what's actually controlling the cash flow in your business, then in my opinion, you should be, because gut instinct is great. Emotion is great. It's what makes business fun, but the numbers don't lie. It's all about the numbers. Okay. If you're going to be making big decisions in your business, make sure you've got the data to underpin the decisions you're making. Okay. So let's go. Cool bananas. All right. Accounts receivable. Let's dive into the balance sheet. Accounts receivable, basically people who owe you money. Now, with each of these items, I'll have a quick chat about how we measure them, and then we'll talk about why it's important. Okay, so if you're going to measure the performance of your account receivables, which is really how well you're managing the people who owe you money, there's a simple formula there. You just take your average accounts receivable, divide it by your sales for that period, multiply it by, for a year, it'll be annual sales in 365. For a month, it'll be a month sales in 30 days. And that will give you how many days it takes you to collect your money. All right, and that will take into account your cash sales as well. That's all built into that to give you a feel for if you sell $1,000 worth of product, for example, you'll get that $1,000 in X days. Okay, now why is this important? Because you've got to have the cash. Like sales is sexy. Like turnover, oh my goodness, revenue, yes. Revenue doesn't pay the bills, boys and girls. You know that. Cash pays the bills. Cash is king. So all the revenue in the world won't save you until you get it in the door. All right. So you need to be managing this side of your business very closely. And we all know it, but that's a way of tracking over time how you're performing, just so you don't let it get away from you. Okay. Now, one really important thing is if you're operating with any sort of overdraft or a debtor finance facility or factoring or whatever you want to call it, if you've got some sort of trading cash flow support in there, every day that people don't pay you costs you. Simple as that. And this is a way of making sure that doesn't get out of control. We'll talk a bit more about that later on. But if you can reduce that accounts receivable days through sound management and just sticking to your guns, then you're going to reduce the cost of your business. You'll improve your cash flow, which will give you more money to do more things to make more money. Okay. And this is a trap that we've all fallen into from time to time. We'll have a customer that buys big and pays slow. They're not necessarily a good customer. Okay, you have to look at your margins and then you look at what the cost of them paying slow is and figure out if it's worth doing the business. Because there's been more than one occasion I've sat down with a client, we've gone right through their age debtors and their age creditors and had a look at who owes them money and how slowly they pay. And we worked out with one of them, their biggest client was making them nothing. Absolutely nothing. There was no point having the client on board. In fact, all they're doing was tying up productive capacity that could have gone into doing work for clients who paid quicker and actually made some money. So a good customer is one who pays on time, okay? You're not a bank, okay? Seriously, even if you own a bank, you're not a bank, okay? Don't do it, all right? Don't behave like a bank. Collect your debts, put some pressure on, have a policy, have some terms of trade that you insist your people stick to. I know it's easily said, not necessarily easily implemented, but you've got to start with that. You've got to lay the foundations, draw the line in the sand, whatever you want to call it. But this is a critical part of business. Okay. Like I said, if you're not getting the money and you're funding their business, all right, don't do it. Now, sorry, right at the end of all these slides is a set of financials, okay? And this is set up for a workshop where they've got the numbers in front. We play around with the numbers and just get people familiar with the process. But have a look at your own numbers, your own financials, and have a look at what your accounts receivable days look like over the past 2 or 3 years. Now, work it out on a quarterly basis. If you can break your figures down that much, just have a look at the last 3 years trading and just have a look at the trend and see if the actual data backs up how you think you've gone. You may be pleasantly surprised or not. Now, the other side of the book, accounts payable. Rule number 1. Okay, now we'll come back one step. The ratio is the same. Okay, it's the same philosophy. Your average payables, how much you've spent, and then the time frame involved. Now, that will take into account, of course, cash purchases. Does it the same as with accounts receivable. Okay, it takes everything into account and says, okay, on average, this is how quickly you pay your debts. Okay. Now, if you're blowing that out, you know this too, you're going to run the risk of losing suppliers. Okay, and that has a pretty nasty effect on the business. The other side of it is that that number's trending downwards, or you're paying them quicker, and you're starting to get inside your terms of trade, okay, that they've given you that you have to be able to adhere with. You're actually funding their business. Don't get that. Right? Unless they're offering you a significant discount for paying early, don't do it. It's crazy stuff. Okay, even if it's your cousin's mother's third boyfriend who runs the business and you owe him a favour, don't do it. Okay, business is business at the end of the day. Okay, so keep in mind your terms of trade. Have a look at your trend. And again, it'll be the same slide coming up. Work out the numbers. We'll come back here. Work out the numbers. Have a look at where your trend is over the last time frame. Like if you've been in business for 2 years, great. Have a look at the last 2 years' figures. Break it down into 6-month blocks and just see if there's some sort of seasonality and fluctuations. And then look at the data and think about what was going on in the business in those time frames and see if there's some correlation, or if it's simply a case of you let things slip, or your accounts people lets things slip, or you got a bit enthusiastic and paid early. Right? Nothing wrong with paying early if you're getting a discount to do so. If they're paying you to do so, because paying early is a cost to your business, especially if you're using some sort of cash flow funding. Don't do it. Okay? Pay when you have to pay, not before. Now, stock and work in progress. I might spend a couple of minutes on this actually. Now, this is where you can get a lot of money tied up very quickly. And that's not just in stock on your shelves or your inventory, not at all. You can get money tied up here in hours worked. Okay, and I'll talk a bit later about service businesses, but it's a trap, right? It really can be. And I'm sure you know this instinctively that you've got to keep an eye on that stuff. Here's how you measure how efficient your stock management processes are. Again, your average stock figure over time frame, your cost of goods sold, okay, and then multiply that by the time frame involved and say, okay, we turn over our inventory every 27 days or 65 days or 180 days, okay? Have a look at the trend. It's always about the trend of these numbers, because the actual number for a time frame may not mean anything at all, but it's the trend that will count. If your stock, if that day is trending down, then 2 things are happening. 1, your stock levels relative to your sales are coming down. Okay, simple. Right? Your cost of goods sold, they're slipping. So you're managing that a lot more efficiently. Okay. However, it might also mean you're simply running stock down. And when somebody comes with a big order, you've got a supply issue because you can't supply them. Right? You've got to go back to the market to get some more stock, go on sell or to manufacture, or you need to bring staff on to do the work. Okay, and we'll talk about that in a second as well. That's a thing that a lot of service businesses don't think about. So just keep an eye on that ratio. And just the same thing, look at the number, think of what was going on in the business at that time and find the correlation. Okay, what made that happen? Okay. Now, product business, like I said, it's a measure of the efficiency of your stock control. Okay, if you're a wholesaler or a retailer, it's a nice number to look at because it'll tell you whether you're building stock up relative to your sales, and that's really not a great thing if you're overstocking, unless you're building up over a time frame for a specific purpose, a big Christmas sale, something where you're going to simply offload all that stock. Because if you're doing it without some end result in mind, you're simply stashing money on the shelf for no good reason. Okay. Now, Work in progress. If you're a manufacturer, you've got hours put into basically producing your products, got the materials that have gone in there, and you should be tracking that. If you don't have systems which track that, my contact details will then give me a call, we'll set them up. Okay. You've got to keep an eye on where the money's going in your business. Now, if those numbers are coming down, then you're streamlining it. Okay. You've got more efficient production lines. That's money in your pocket. Right. If they're blowing out, you need to sit down and have a good hard look at what's going on from raw material to finished good. Say, okay, somewhere in here, there's a blockage. Putting more hours into something, which you may or may not be charging for. And again, that's a conversation we can have. Or certainly things are getting done slowly, or you've got supply issues, or there's something going wrong. Okay, find out the reason, because that is money tied up where it shouldn't be. Okay, and again, you streamline that, you bring that number down, your cash flow improves, you've got more money to do more things, which is the whole point of the exercise. Okay. Now, they're the three big ones. They're the balance sheet ones, and they are easy to measure. You know what's going on there. What we're going to talk about later is something that takes a bit more tweaking, a little bit more playing around. Okay, so for the next 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes, we're going to roll through the next 4. Now, so one other thing, service-based, just like work in progress. How many hours do you have in the job? Now, most service-based businesses that I've dealt with, in fact, nearly all of them, have got timesheet systems that measure who's putting what hours into what. So they know where their money's being tied up. If you're not doing that, you should. It's the same as a manufacturing business. You've gone from proposal to client, acceptance proposal, and the clock starts ticking there. Okay, you hit the stopwatch there, and then at the end of it, you've got contract finished, you get paid. Now, there may be progress payments on the way through. If there are, great. Okay, it's a good way to do business. But you've still got all that money tied up until it's finished, because no one gets all the money before it's finished. And that's where your profit's at in that last payment. So you want to minimize the amount of time you got tied up, so you maximize the amount of cash you get out of the deal and you get the money in quicker. Okay? It's got exactly the same impact on working capital as having steel bars sitting in a rack before it goes into the machine and a bloke sitting around leaning on a lathe because he's got nothing to do. Right? If you've got people working on a job and they're not getting it out the door in an acceptable time span, then you've got money tied up. Again, have a look at the numbers, have a look at the trend, think about what was going on then and measure that up against what improvements can be made. Now, same exercise as the other two, have a look at your numbers, pick some time frames. In fact, I would suggest you pick the same time frames as we use for accounts receivable and accounts payable, and have a look at those 3 numbers in sync and just see how they match up and see what fluctuations, what the trend lines look like with their fluctuations, so that you can see how they interact. Now, profit loss, yay, pricing. Okay, just remember, revenue doesn't pay the bills. Now, pricing, price change. How much are your margins? Okay, now we often talk about price change percentage. Okay, how much can we sneak it up? How much do we have to take it down to boost revenue and then go collect the money and boost cash flow? Now, there are things that you can't predict, such as a spike in fuel prices. Sometimes your materials costs will go up without warning. Sometimes your staff costs, although it's unlikely now, but you get a wage rise that you've got to allow for. How much fat have you got in your margins to absorb that extra cost? And indeed, the trick question is, how much fat have you got to pass on? Have you got any elasticity in your demand where you can actually increase your pricing a little bit without blowing your market out of the water? Now, you've got to be able to accommodate those variations, right? And we all know that. You just don't want to sit there and cop a cost increase and go, nothing I can do, I was going to take the hit. Okay, you've got to be able to have some flexibility there so you can roll with that. Now, you need to know how much you can move. Now, I'll just come to the bottom of this next slide. McDonald's are the classic for doing this. Okay, they just make a little increase, just a small one, 15 cents, 20 cents, 40 cents. Nobody notices it, really. Nobody complains about it because they want their Maccas. And that is how McDonald's deal with any changes in input costs. There's a little sneaky price increase here, there, and everywhere, and they just boom, don't even notice the cost increase at all. That's also how they boost their profits a little bit, because you can guarantee in that business, sooner or later, their competitors will follow them if McDonald's aren't already following their competitors. Okay. Now, the trick is, if you're in that sort of highly competitive market, Avoid the temptation, if at all costs, if you can, at all costs, avoid the temptation to go for the lowest price, because as soon as you do that, you've got two problems. One, you're going to smash your profit margins. Okay, it's going to hurt. And two, you're going to start educating your clients into the fact that you're a commodity. You're simply price-based. Quality becomes less of an issue. The relationship you've got with your customers becomes less of an issue. And we can talk about that on Thursday. And suddenly you're just sitting there watching your cash flow dwindle because you're in a race to the bottom. Okay. Problem with dropping your margins down, and we'll talk about this in a second, is that your costs might necessarily move in the same direction. So you've got to squeeze. So you've got to increase revenue to get the same net cash at the end of the day. And if you drop your profit prices and your competitors follow you down, you might not increase your market share. Okay, so think about bundling, or not so much discounting. I'm really not a fan of discounting. Think about bundling some of your products up. Mavis, shoe shop, classic for this. You know, buy two pairs, the second price, the lower, pay full price for two pairs, but the lower price you get half price. Okay, so they get 50% off the cheaper pair of shoes, but they get one pair out the door at full whack, full margin, and on the other, they're probably making a few dollars. Okay, so the first pair covers the cost of the sale. The second pair, that's their profit. Okay, brilliant. It's a great strategy, and it works for them because they've eaten up all the other shoe shops pretty much. The only people that are competing with them are either bottom of the market or right at the top. When they own the middle, which is most people, like that's theirs, and that's one way they keep the competition against the wall. And one thing you can consider as well, which is often used, is CPI increases. I know it's a silly hope that very little of this is news to you guys, but it's something that in the heat of the day, we don't focus on. Like, I'm guilty of doing it myself with some of the clients I speak to, is that we're so deep in the business that we forget to pop our heads up, have a look around at the marketplace, at everybody around, and say, well, hang on, what's everybody else doing? Okay, have we got some room here? Let's have a look at what our competitors are charging, because we've got a pretty good idea what their costs are. They're in the same business as us, and we've got relatively the same suppliers. You know, have we got some room to move there? Can we actually find an edge where we do a better quality product at the same price and eat their market? Or can we do a better quality product at a slightly better price and still eat some of their market and get more money back in? Can we offer better service and take some of the market share? Look, there's a lot of ways you can do that, but you've got to just take the time to stop, breathe, pop your head up and have a look at what everybody else is doing. And that leads nicely into sales volume. Okay. Now, revenue ain't all that. Okay, so I mentioned this a few times when it comes to sales volume. Revenue doesn't pay the bills, and in fact, revenue can send you broke. Chasing sales volume can smash you. It's called over trading. It's trap number 302 in the accounting book of traps. Sales need to catch out. You know that, right? In order to provide whatever service or product you provide to your customers, you've got to spend some money. You've either got to have staff, product, premises. There's a zillion things that you're punching dollars into in order to deliver that product and make a dollar. And all that stuff generally has to be paid for before you get paid. So the more you put out the door, the more you've got to pay for. So you need that cash flow coming in to pay for the more stuff, to put more stuff out the door. Nice little circular argument, which is why the first four we spoke about are critical. Okay, you've got to have that cash flow coming. The more cash you have coming through the business, the more stuff you can do, like punch your sales volume up so you can make more money. Now, I'll give you a little bit of an anecdote here. When I first started in business banking, way back in the day, it actually was a fair while ago now, had one of our really good clients go broke because they took on, they overtraded. They took on too many big contracts. One of them was with one of our local government authorities who were very slow paying and then decided they weren't going to pay. The very slow paying had our guys right under the pump because it was a big job. They had a lot of men on the job, a lot of materials tied up, a lot of money going out the door to make this thing happen. And then the payment started slowing on the other side, which means they couldn't pay people. So they had people not turning up, materials not turning up, which affected other jobs they were on. And then the LGA said, no, actually, we're not paying for this now. We're going to put it on hiatus for 6 months. Got to have an administrator called in. Oops, bang, one for all money. Now, it's a little bit of an outlier. I know that in that particular construction industry, it happens where you have a couple of, where a client will go down or a supplier will go bankrupt. Suddenly, you're in trouble. Okay, somebody goes out of business, one of your contractors died. You know, it can happen. But the primary cause of the policy, make one step. If the LGA had said early on, sorry, we're not paying, would have been fine. But they went on and on. So they were doing this job and they did another job, and suddenly they've got 2 or 3 on the go for these guys. A lot of people on site, a lot of materials coming in. That was killing them. Right? Even if the LGA had still kept on their slow, we're going to pay every 6 months approach to life, they still would have gone under because they couldn't afford, they simply couldn't raise the capital to fund everything to make these big jobs happen because there wasn't enough margin, everything else they were doing to make the big jobs happen. So sales volume, be super cautious when you decide you're going to increase your sales by X%, work your cash flows out, sit down again, contact details at the end, give me a call, send me an email, and we'll go right through that process with you, but map out what it's going to cost you in the way of cash to boost your sales. Okay, it's a trap for young players. And there we go. This is everything I just talked about. Okay, even if you're service based and you take on a big contract, okay, you need people to do it. Can you get them? How much is it going to cost? How quickly are you going to get paid for the new contract to pay the people that you've just brought on? More premises, more equipment, more everything. Okay, nothing for free. Now, well, okay, if you're not doing your cash flows, if you're focused on punching up your revenue, great. Give me a call, we'll work it out, because you need to do that before you pull the trigger on these new initiatives. Now, which leads you back to cost of goods sold. Okay, now you can't get away from it. Okay, if you're going to supply something, service, a good, anything, there's a cost of providing that. Okay. Now, these are a direct cost, as I say there. They're also variable because as you sell more, your cost of goods sold goes up generally. Okay, it's to make sure that as your sales go up, your cost of goods sold, the line they don't go in lockstep. Hopefully, you get your cost of goods sold down a little bit. And that's what we're talking about here. Is that how can you keep your cost of goods sold not only under control, but can you reduce it? Right, it comes right back to the start. We were talking about accounts payable, accounts receivable, and work in progress and stock. Work in progress and stock, okay? That's the one you want to keep an eye on because that directly impacts your cost of goods sold. If you can control that, okay, then essentially you're getting more margin on the job, so when people pay you, there's more money left over for you. That's kind of plan on it, okay? Now, there we go. Ways you can do that, okay? Buying in bulk, and again, this is all common sense stuff that I'm sure you already know. Buy in bulk, okay? If you can tie the cash up, and if you get a big enough discount on that supply to justify it, then do it, okay? Invest in it so that down the track, when you get paid, there's more cash for you, okay? Think about getting simply better rates from your suppliers, okay? Electricity, for example, negotiate, shop around a little bit. Insurance, if you haven't got an insurance broker, get one, okay? They'll get you the best deals. Your finance, if you're not using a commercial finance broker, get one. Okay, you may end up back with your existing bank, but you'll have a better deal. And that's the name of the game, is to reduce your costs. Okay, waste reduction. Okay, good client of mine. We've been mates for a long time. I've looked after him for years with his finance. We've recently put in some new machinery. Not only does it do the work of 2 people, so they've freed up staff to do other work, which boosts their production capability, it's incredibly efficient. Their wastage has gone down by 10%. And given the amount of steel they put through that business, it's a manufacturing business, that 10%, that's an enormous amount of money, which they simply, effectively, from memory, don't quote me on this, but from memory, the reduction in wastage pays half of the cost of the new machinery. Half the cost. And so don't worry about the increased production capability of the machine itself. Don't worry about the profit on the parts this machine can now make in one part. Don't worry about the fact we now got 2 guys off doing other work, boosting production. Just think about that. The machine itself, simply by putting it in and reducing wastage, it pays for 3.5 days out of 7. That's pretty cool. And again, as I'm saying here, like if you're looking through the slides, if you're service-based, it's just attention to detail. You know, are your work practices efficient? Do you have multiple handling of documents? Do you have multiple handling of meetings? Do you have too many meetings? My goodness, if I see another meeting, I'll scream. how you're tracking all of that, because that has a big impact on your cash flow. Okay. Know how many labour hours you're selling compared to how many you're paying for. Okay. Again, you should have systems in place that track that. If not, drop me a line, we'll sort that out for you. Because those little differences, you tweak those little things, and they're just little things to tweak. Money in the bank, you've got more money hanging around that you can do more stuff with to make more money to do more stuff with, which is, again, plan A. Right. Don't worry about the attached financials, have a look at your own margins and just look at the trends. And I would suggest that don't do it on an annual basis. I would do that at least quarterly, if not monthly, over 2-3 years. If however long you've been trading, pick a decent time frame and then map it out at a time. Just have a look at the fluctuations and have a look at when the fluctuations happen. Is there a reason for your gross margin suddenly shrinking or growing? If so, cool. Either fix the problem or duplicate the effort. Okay, it's something that you should do every now and then just to make sure that things aren't slipping and you're not losing a little bit of cash on the way through. Okay, and again, a little tweak here, a little tweak there, a little tweak somewhere else, and suddenly your cash flow is much better, which reduces your cost of funding, which gives you more money to do more things, and away we go on the merry-go-round. Okay. Overheads. Well, this is pretty much every other expense. This is your fixed costs. Now, easy enough to work out where your overheads run. Work that ratio out for your own business, run it out again over a monthly or quarterly basis for a couple of years and just see where the fluctuations are, if there are any. And if there are, have a look, think about why. Okay, can you duplicate that? Is there a problem to fix? Now, there's ways of getting those down. Okay, again, negotiate with your power suppliers. Okay, that's power's both, is a cost of goods sold in some businesses, it's simply an operating cost in others. It's your telephone, your internet charges, negotiate, good grief. There's a million offers out there, okay? Get somebody to jump onto it. Brokers for insurance, brokers for finance. Negotiate, negotiate, negotiate. Wages. Now, wages are not necessarily all that negotiable. That's fine. But there is a way where you can actually reduce your wages cost relative to your output. And that is put in place production bonuses, okay? Performance bonuses. So your wages cost then as a percentage of revenue goes down, because even though you're paying more for increased performance. Okay, now there's not always a lot of room to do that. It's sometimes a little bit utopian, but have a think about what it is your staff do for you. Are there people on your workforce that you can incentivize and reward for producing more? Okay, think about the wastage in the business. Okay, supply contracts. There's some way you can incentivize your staff to get a better deal. Okay, a little bit outside the box for a lot of industries, but if you can do it, have a crack. Okay, because again, it's money in the bank, which we're all on about. Now, as I said, right, we're talking about competitive advantage. That's the whole underlying premise of the Small Eggs chat is let's do things that improve your cash flow so you have a competitive advantage, so you're able to make more money to do more things, to make more money to do more things. Okay, have a look at what your competitors are doing. Okay, because there's no shame in copying them if they're doing something right. Like McDonald's may have been one of the first fast food franchises, but every man and his dogs try to imitate them in one way or another, or they try to be just like McDonald's, only better. And that's cool. That's cool if you can get away with that. All right. As I said right at the start, okay, competitive advantage, if you can bring your cost of financing down, simply by bringing your accounts receivable in earlier or paying your accounts payable when they're due, not early, then that reduces your interest cost, which frees up some cash, which means maybe you can take some purchase discounts because you can buy bulk, get your costs down there, which frees up more cash down the track. Okay, so you can see at least one thing leads to another, which leads to another, and then suddenly your cash flow is much smoother. Classic example of this actually, and this is a client I dealt with, oh gosh, it must be 7 years ago now. Okay, now these guys have a lot of machinery, a lot of smaller gear, okay, right on lawnmowers, tractors, slashers, just rats and mice stuff, but an awful lot of it, and they paid cash for it. And I sat down and said, well, okay, it's fine. You've got a debtor finance facility. What's the rate on your debtor finance facility? And we played with numbers there for about 5 or 10 minutes and came up and said, yep, 12.5%. As I said, it was a few years ago. I said, okay, so all this equipment that you've paid cash for that we could have done on a bulk lease for some here and some there, like you would have been getting that about 7%. Instead, you paid cash, which means effectively you're paying 12.5%. And they sat there and looked at me. What do you mean? I said, well, this is what I mean. You paid cash. So instead of having that money in the bank account and not having to draw down on your debtor finance facility and not having to pay 12.5%, you've put the cash out the door to buy the gear, which means when you've gone to pay other bills, you've had to draw down on the debtor finance facility. It's costing you 12.5%. It's just crazy days. And you can see the penny drop. They're going, oh, small change in habit. Okay, it's a case, instead of just replacing one thing, let's go through. Is there a stack of gear that is really beyond its use by date? It's just dead. You just haven't buried it yet. Okay, all right, let's upload all that. Replace it with new gear. So we've got 3 to 5 years of no dramas. Okay, and we do it in one bulk hit. Okay, we simply get a lease line, so you can go out and spend 50 or 60 or 70 grand in one hit, replace a heap of stuff. If you want to replace one thing, well, that's okay. Let's not replace one thing. If we can make it last, so we're replacing 5 things, much smarter, and we reduce the cost. And that was something like $250,000 worth in the first year. They knocked 12% off. Okay, that's 30 odd K in the kick in that first 12 months. Free cash. It's not bad. No, that's not bad for a small change in habits and just really thinking about what you're doing across the whole business when you're doing it and how you're doing it. Okay. I'm happy with that outcome. They ended up selling the business a couple of years later. And now, as far as I know, they're sitting on the beach fishing. But at the time, that was a huge outcome for them because it just took the whole pressure off in a few little key areas, which meant they had some more money so they could pay a few of their more demanding suppliers a little earlier, which took pressure off staff so the workplace was more productive, which freed up some time to do other things, which meant they made more cash elsewhere. And you see where I'm going with this? Okay, we've got that whole snowball effect. You fix one thing here, and that has an impact here, which has an impact here, which makes the whole thing generate more cash, which that's the point of today's talk, generate more cash, okay? And again, have a look at your own numbers, work out your net margins, have a look at the fluctuations, have a look at when they occurred and what was happening there. Is there something you need to duplicate or is there something that we just need to not duplicate ever again, okay? Work it out and see what answers you come up with. Now, as I said, have a look at your results. I've said that all the way through. Have a look at what you're doing and how that matches up to where you think you should be. Okay, now I've got a mate of mine who runs a business in town here. Now I don't do any work with him. We just have a coffee and a chat occasionally. He's not a bad little mentor to have, to be honest. Very smart guy, got a great business. And we're talking about this very talk, gosh, 4 or 5 months ago now. And he said, he just shook his head and said, nah, he just looks at his sales figures. Once he's looked at his sales figures, he knows where he's at. It's fine. Doesn't need to work all the other stuff out. I said, okay, that's great. So you clearly know your margins, both from a production and an operating point of view, and you know what your collection timelines are like, and you know what your payment timelines are like. And he said, yeah. I said, well, that's because you've been in business for 20 years. So you're doing all this stuff in one hit because those things don't really fluctuate in your business. You've got it all under control because you have great systems in place and staff who implement those systems and they don't step outside the box. Right. I said, yes. So you actually have all these systems in place. It's all done mentally. You just look at the sales figures and you know what minimum sales you have to hit your minimum cash at the end of the month, which is what you want. That's the plan. Okay. If you're in business where you've only been there for a couple of years, 3 to 5 years perhaps, I would suggest that put in place some systems to monitor this. Now, most accounting packages will spit out a lot of this information for you, okay? But what they sometimes will produce will be like an aged debtors or creditors. That's useful, but it's more useful if you match it up with your actual payment days and your collection days. So you can have a look at where the fluctuations are, how far out you are sitting from where you think you should be, and pick out those outlying customers that either need to be, or suppliers, which need to be dragged in or knocked on the head, one or the other, okay? And like I said right at the start, improving your results sometimes involves getting rid of a big client. or a couple of small clients who, you know, they buy regularly, but they pay so slow, there's no money in it. Okay, you're tying up staff time, chasing them up. There's no margin in it. If there's no margin in the business, you need to think long and hard about why you're doing it. Okay, it's simple stuff. Right? This is business 101. Okay. Now, like I said, there's everything we've gone through. We've looked at the 3 on the balance sheet. We've looked at the 4 on the profit and loss. Okay, they're the drivers. Okay, they really are the accounts in your financials that will tell you how your cash flow is really performing, right? Because you can look at your bank balance and that will give you a number, but these will tell you how you're generating that number, what areas where you can actually pick up a little bit and areas where you need to really focus hard and pull things in, okay? Now, there's my contact details. I'll leave that up there for a minute for you. Okay, now we're running ahead of time. If there are no questions, which there aren't, okay, I'll leave that sit there for a couple of minutes and then I think we can wrap this one up nice and early and you can get on with your day. And with a bit of luck, that'll give you some time where you can have a look at your financials, run through what drives your cash flow and where you can tweak it. Think about what systems you might want to put in place. If you don't have systems to measure this and you think it would be a good idea, get in touch, okay? I can work it out with you, or if you want somebody to, if you're not local in Southeast Queensland here, I can certainly put you in touch with one of your ASBAS consultants locally, one of the general business guys or girls, and they'll sit down with you one-on-one and come up with some strategies and some systems so that your cash flow is improved, which means you've got more money to do more things, to make more money to do more things, which is plan A. Okay. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you got something out of today. That certainly was the plan. And I'll see you, hopefully I'll see you tomorrow, where we'll go through some of the mindset of the 4 stages of business, from your really cool idea to your wonderful exit and then off to your next really cool idea, whatever that may be. And on Thursday, drop back in and we'll go through building some customer advocates that quick buy, which is the cheapest source of cash flow you will ever find. Cheers, guys. Thank you.